Questions before we get started? Okay. Feel free to unmute at any time, Zoom friends, Zoomies, and ask a question. Okay, so we're working on chapter 4 lecture. All right, we have another picture of something that is going on here, my guess, and is that it's some type of surgery. You see the people scrubbed up. You have some people in some masks. It looks like they have something in some tweezers here. It looks like it's at a very, I'm guessing it was maybe in a very low temperature. That's maybe why it's giving off some sort of fog, or maybe the picture's a little blurry. But again, we always have these pictures at the beginning of our lecture that I'm always confused about a little bit. But here's our points to ponder. These are always good review questions at the beginning of the PowerPoint. If you can answer these questions, you probably have a fairly good understanding of what we talked about in lecture. We're going to talk about tissues, organs, and organ systems. We're going to talk about the 4 main types of tissues today. What do they look like? How do they function? What do they do? What is the integumentary system? Can we prevent skin cancer? And then what is homeostasis and how is it maintained? Okay, so what is a tissue? Okay, this isn't something you just blow your nose in. Tissue is a collection of cells of the same type that perform a common function. Okay, so we talked about how things that are living are organized. They're organized from an atom to molecules to, and working all the way up to the biosphere. Tissues, they were in there a little bit too. These are all those cells that maybe, like it says, have the same type and perform a common function. These are specific cells that work together to do some sort of function. So when I think of a tissue, I think of, like it says down here, your connective tissue, your muscular tissue, your nervous tissue, your epithelial tissue. These are the 4 major types in the body. Your tissues make up your organs. Your organs make up your organ systems, okay? So we're kind of working from something that's really small and kind of making it into something bigger and bigger and bigger, and see how in relation those work together. The first is the connective tissue. This is what binds and supports parts of the body. We have specialized cells that are ground substance and protein fibers. So I think of this as all the things that are kind of connecting are together, kind of, what am I trying to say? They're connecting the different types of things together. So we have fibrous, supportive, and fluid. The connective tissue, the protein fibers, it helps things come together to make up the matrix of the tissue. So these are all the things that are connecting different things that support and bind throughout the body. So if there's different types of fluid, or if there's different types of supportive tissues that help our organs and other living parts of our body survive. There are 3 main types of connective tissue: fibrous, supportive, and fluid. This is a picture in your book, figure 4.4. There are, like it says, the 3 different types here. And then it gives some examples on the bottom. So fibrous connective tissue can either be loose or dense. Okay, so that seems kind of the opposite, right? If you have loose fibrous connective tissue and dense. Loose, it just says, are created loose and have like an open framework. And the dense are finely packed together in a dense area. So loose and dense are the 2 different types of fibrous connective tissue. That next one is supportive connective tissue. You have cartilage or bone. So when you think of the things that help make up your body that connect things to one another, we've got your cartilage and your bone. Cartilage can be found in your ear. It can be found in your knee. This is solid yet flexible, right? So my ear keeps its shape, right? It keeps its shape. It's normal, but I can bend my ear in ways that I cannot bend my arm, right? Like the middle part of my arm where the bone is. And the bone is solid and rigid matrix. Solid, rigid, it just means that you can't really move it. Now, you can break a bone, you can, damage cartilage, but they are supportive connective tissues. Then the last one, we have fluid connective tissue. You have blood and lymph. That's kind of hard to say with a mask on, lymph. The blood is contained in the blood vessels. We talk a little bit about blood throughout the course, especially when we start to talk about the heart. But the blood in your blood vessels, it has a lot of important jobs, right? It helps to take oxygen from your lungs to your extremities. It helps to get rid of waste throughout your body, and things like that. And then the lymph is contained in the lymphatic vessels. This is important for fighting off infections. So there's 3 different types of the connective tissue. We've got fibrous, supportive, and fluid. And if we go back 2 slides, there are 4 types of tissue, and we just branched off of this connective tissue right here. You guys can't see that. So we just did, So we just worked off of just connective tissue right there. With the connective tissue, like I said, you have those 3 different types. Sometimes it helps if people make some sort of flow chart like this to help study so you can understand the branches of how things are broken down. Other than that, it is in your PowerPoint. So let's talk a little bit more about that fibrous connective tissue. So we talked about there's 2 types. There's dense and loose, but both contain fibroblast cells with a matrix of collagen and elastic fibers. Does anybody know where collagen is important for, or what maybe you've heard about collagen? Collagen. Have you ever heard of somebody putting collagen in their coffee before, maybe? It's like a powder. So it's really good for like your hair, your skin, and your nails. Collagen is really important. It's a supportive part of that. And elastic fibers. So fibers that are able to move and bend. So these loose fibrous tissues are what are found in supporting epithelium and many internal organs. So epithelium is like your skin, your layers of your skin, many internal organs. So that loose fibrous tissue is what helps to support and connect. Remember, there's a difference between loose and dense. And then adipose tissue, adipose is fat, is a special loose fibrous tissue where fat is stored. Okay, so that's a little bit more about that fibrous tissue. Just to go back and review where we are at, we are working on that left part of that picture right here on figure 4.4. We just kind of briefly described some more about that fibrous connective tissue. So here's a great example. What does loose fibrous connective tissue look like? Okay, so here's an adipose cell. It stores fat. It says ground substance. This fills the space between cells and fibers. So while cells and fibers are super, super small inside of your body, you have to think that there is still space between them. Even though you think of all of your cells of your body being very small and close together, there is space between them. You have that elastic fiber. It's branched and it's stretchable. It's kind of showing it looking a little bit kind of like the purple, darker purple lines. A stem cell, it divides to produce other types of cells. Maybe you've heard of stem cell research in the news, and there being some debates about stem cell research. A collagen fiber is unbranched, it's strong and flexible. We've got a fibroblast, it divides to produce other types of cells. We have the reticular fiber, which is branched thin and forms a network, and we have a white blood cell that engulfs pathogens or produces antibodies. So that seems kind of important nowadays. Those white blood cells down here. Let's see if I still have my highlighter. There we go. That's important for fighting off infections, pathogens, invaders into our body. Okay, and then we've got a picture from, so the left part is figure 4.1 and 4.2. Okay, so this is kind of zooming in a little bit on that knee area. Okay, so we have person right here, zooming in on their knee. So here's that kneecap. Here's where that tibia meets the fibula in the body. We've got all that, we've got some adipose tissue right here. You guys can see that. Some fat cells here in the middle, okay? Remember we talked about it before when we talked about lipids, that while there is a negative connotation for having like fat on your body or things like that, it's not necessarily the case, because fat protects your organs and it protects your body. It helps maintain temperature. So as you can see, all around your knee, which is a fairly important part of your body, you do have adipose tissue. You do have fat cells around there. You have different fibrous and connective tissues, loose and dense, that are in your knee and in that area to help with the bending of your knee. It helps protect the bones and the joints and the ligaments. All right, so here we have supportive connective tissue. So we talked a little bit about the fibrous connective tissue. Now here's that supportive part. Just to give you a brief reminder, now we're working in that middle part of this table, supportive connective tissue. Okay, this is the cartilage, like the cartilage in your ear. The cells are in chambers called lochnae, and the matrix is solid but flexible. I think the best example of that is your ear, right? Your ear maintains shape, it is solid, but you are able to bend it and it is flexible. Okay, then there's different types of cartilage. You have hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. The hyaline cartilage is like in your nose, the ends of long bones, and the fetal skeleton. So does anybody know what the word fetal means?
Like your bones when you're a baby?
Yeah, so fetal is just that, it essentially means it's a step of the developmental process of life of humans. So the fetal skeleton would be before, as it's going from a sperm and an egg and you develop into an embryo, you then develop into a fetus. Then the fetal skeleton is made up of cartilage. Okay, so it's a part of that developmental step. Then we have elastic cartilage. This is more elastic fibers than cartilage fibers. This is in that outer ear. So this is what that example I just showed with my ear. The hyaline cartilage is like in your nose. You can't see my nose right now because I'm wearing a mask. The fibrocartilage, it's strong collagen fibers. This is located in the discs between your vertebrae. Okay, so that seems fairly important. If any of you attended lecture on Friday, you know that I had a little bit of a back issue. So when the movement of your back is very important, or your vertebrae. Your vertebrae also contain a lot of nerve endings. Okay, it's really important. It helps communicate with the rest of your body to your brain. Okay, so the fibrocartilage, if you think of your vertebrae being bones kind of stacked on top of each other, in between those bones you have that fibrocartilage. It's strong, it's very structural, it helps humans to be able to stand upright, but at the same time we have to be able to move a little bit, move up and back, so that fibrocartilage helps with maintaining shape and protecting, but allowing for some movement as well. And then we have bone. This is probably one of the most common you can think of. These are cells in chambers called lochnae. They are solid and rigid matrix made of collagen and calcium salts. Okay, maybe when you were a kid, or even maybe now, there was a saying that's like, drink your milk for strong bones and teeth, right? Yeah, maybe. There's also studies been done that say you don't just have to drink cow's milk to get calcium. But calcium salts, it calcifies, it's hard, This allows for protection of your internal organs, like your rib cage. Think about what your rib cage is protecting, right? It protects your lungs, it protects your heart. Those seem like pretty important things when our body's main goal is to just pump blood and breathe, right? Humans make it more complicated than that. But bone is protective. It's also for structural reasons, right? It's the reason that I can stand up on 2 legs. Not everybody has the capability to do that because of maybe some sort of disease or disability. And so bone is very important, and it's an important part of the connective tissue. So we have compact and spongy. These are the 2 different types of bone. Okay, that compact bone is made of repeating circular units called osteons, which contain the hard matrix, living cells, and blood vessels. This is shafts of long bone. So the bones in your leg and your arm, these are going to be that compact, that made of osteons, those cells, circular. I believe we get, yep, on the next slide, we're going to see a picture of what an osteon looks like under a microscope. Spongy is an open lattice work with irregular spaces. This is at the ends of long bones. So this is kind of where we get towards maybe a long bone is going to meet up like with your wrist or your hand or your ankle or your knee. So towards the end of your bone, you get that spongy lattice, irregular spaces. This is also why, you know, breaking a bone in your leg, in the middle of your leg, it's very uncommon. It happens, but it's uncommon. Think about how many knee injuries, ankle injuries, wrist injuries, elbows, shoulders, all those kind of intersections on your body, hips. That's where most of the injuries happen, whether that be athletic or just even occupational. It's because of that type of bone that is there. So let's look at a picture here. On that bottom, we have, this is hyaline cartilage here on the bottom. Okay, that matrix is the space in between, and this is the lochnae, the cell with a lochnae. Good. This is that connective tissue in the knee. So what do bone and cartilage look like? A knee is a great example of that. So obviously we can see here that this is a bone. Oops, trying to draw here. All right, this is a bone here. We can see that here for the folks back home. There we go. So there's a bone. Here's another bone, okay, that meet together here. Okay. This part of the bone down here is going to start to be more of that compact, and then up here is going to be more of that spongy. So the spongy is going to be, let me draw here for pen. This is going to be more of that spongy right here. Here's where we go to be more of that compact. So we have spongy and compact. Okay, these are those adipose tissues right in there by the kneecap. You can kind of see your kneecap or the person's kneecap right there. Here's a person's kneecap. Okay, you can probably find that on your person and pretty familiar with that. Okay, so now we are on to that third part of the connective tissue. This is the blood, the fluid connective tissue. Remember, we have blood and we have lymph. Blood, you have red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. It is made up of a fluid matrix called the plasma, and this has cellular components that are called formed elements. Okay, maybe you've heard of someone or have someone in your friend group, or maybe you have, who've donated plasma before. It's fairly common. What's in our plasma is some protein, some water, some white blood cells. When somebody needs to receive plasma, it's most likely that they have some sort of immune deficiency disease. Not always. There's other types of reasons why people need plasma, but the main one is that they have a hard time either producing plasma in their own body, or they're having trouble fighting off infections. There are 3 types of formed elements in the blood. Like I said, we have red blood cells. Oops, I didn't mean to cross that off on this. There we go. We have red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Okay, those are super important for different reasons. When I think of red blood cells, you think of that picture in the previous lecture that we've done. Those red blood cells are those circular oval shapes. They have an indent on the top. They are important for carrying oxygen to and from the body. If you've ever heard of someone, or maybe you know of someone, or maybe you have been anemic, it's more common in females, but it's not impossible to be a male who is anemic. You've also maybe heard of it called as an iron deficiency. Being iron deficient means that you have a harder time having iron in your system. And what iron is used for is it attaches to hemoglobin on the red blood cells and carries oxygen to your extremities that it attaches to your red blood cells. So symptoms of somebody who's anemic would be that they feel lightheaded. They feel dizzy. It may be onset with physical activity. And just thinking about that, that means, is there a cricket in here? Nobody? There's a cricket. That's cool. Must be not that great of a lecture. There's crickets in the audience. But the red blood cells, so if you're starting to, go up some stairs, right? That gets me out of breath pretty easily these days. Then you start to breathe a little bit heavier, your muscles are working a little bit harder, you're going to need some more oxygen to those extremities. If you're anemic or you're iron deficient, you're just not as efficient at doing that. So that's what our red blood cells are important for, is carrying oxygen to the rest of the body. White blood cells are what fight infection. So we have red blood cells, now we have white blood cells. Leukocytes is the other name for that. Red blood cells are called erythrocytes. These are the ones that fight off infection. This is super important for many reasons, right? You maybe have in the past gotten some sort of infection that your white blood cells were able to fight off before you even showed any symptoms of anything. That's because our body is constantly wanting to pump blood and breathe, right? Those are our goals here. So if our white blood cells can take care of invaders or infections before it gives some sort of other bodily symptom, that's the goal here. But other times, you get a common cold, you get coronavirus or whatever that is, but most of the time our white blood cells are constantly fighting off infections. It also is why we can have an infection and then overcome that infection, right? It's not like you just have an infection for the rest of your life. So if you have a scab on your knee because you tripped and fell on the sidewalk, and maybe it started to get a little infected, so you're able to have white blood cells that fight off that infection, but also there's some product, you probably added some like hydrogen peroxide to it or things like that, but that's why we can overcome an infection. Some people may have different diseases that don't allow them to fight off infections as well. One of them I can think of is diabetes. So that would be one of those. And then platelets, these are pieces of cells that clot blood. Okay, this is also important. This is the reason why if you have a cut, like the example, you tripped and fell, you have a cut on your knee, okay? It's why that you're not just like constantly bleeding until it heals, right? You have platelets in your body that help go to that site and they clot it so that you don't, continue to bleed. Maybe you've heard of somebody who's on blood thinners. My grandma, I think, is on blood thinners. She's 95 years old. If she gets a cut on her finger, it bleeds for a little bit longer than normal because she's on blood thinners. And there's reason why you would go on blood thinners, but the platelets in your blood allow it to clot when there's some sort of issue, okay? That's also the reason why if you cut your finger, they tell you to apply pressure, okay? So that pressure is just going to kind of speed up that platelet process just a little bit. So these are the three formed elements in your blood. Okay, let's look at a picture on the next slide. Man, that cricket's annoying. For those on Zoom, we have a cricket in the classroom right now. And he's communicating. Okay, so the fluid connective tissue of the blood, there's pictures of the red blood cells, the plasma, the white blood cells, and the platelets. Obviously, in your body, they don't look like this. But let's talk a little bit about what they do look like. So red blood cells are super easy to pick out because they're bright reddish purplish blue. They are circular and they have a little indentation on the top. Okay, this, we talked a little bit in the last lecture about surface area to volume ratio. Red blood cells have a perfect surface area to volume ratio because they need to be very efficient in what they are doing. They want to be able to take oxygen to our extremities in the best way possible. The plasma is what surrounds all these formed elements. It's why when you donate plasma, they give you your red blood cells back. Then you have white blood cells. There are different types of white blood cells, and we don't talk about that in this class. But the different types of white blood cells are identified by the different shape of their nucleus. Here, so you can see, I'm drawing a very great picture up on the board here. There's different, you can kind of see the different types because some of them are circular, like the one down here. Then this one kind of looks like a lima bean right here. And then this one is very speckled up here at the top. So there's different types of white blood cells. And then you have the platelets. Those platelets, remember, are important for clotting. They're important for making sure that you don't bleed out, right? You don't need to lose a lot of blood by a cut on your finger, right? That wouldn't be a very optimal situation, but it happens. And then we have lymph. This matrix fluid is called lymph. The white blood cells congregate in the lymph nodes. You've maybe heard of that word before. So remember when I said white blood cells are important for fighting off infection? This is the lymph, this is that fluid. It's also important for fighting off invaders, infection in your body. You are very thankful probably for these, and it's also very difficult for people who have some sort of immune deficiency or things like that, where they're not able to fight off infections as well as somebody else. Okay, so now we have muscle tissue. Okay, this is the second part. So if you're following along, we went through connective tissue. The different types of connective tissue were the fluid, the fibrous, and the one with the bones, and the connective tissue supportive. There we go. I couldn't think of the word. Now we're on to muscle tissue. So this is a new group, okay? Obviously, you guys can think of your muscles are used for movement, and this isn't just walking or doing sports. Think about movement in general. Think about your heart moving. Your heart moves in and out. Same with your lungs in order to pump blood and pump oxygen and release carbon dioxide and waste out of your body. So there's muscles that are used for movement even if you don't really realize it. You could think of movement like going up a flight of stairs. Obviously, my legs are moving, my arms are moving, but you forget about all the other things. So muscle tissue in general is used for movement. It is made of muscle fibers and cells and protein fibers called actin and myosin. Okay, so those are important terms right there. These are, like it says, made of muscle and tissue, muscle tissue fibers and muscle cells, actin and myosin. There are 3 types of muscle tissue in humans. We have skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Without knowing much about muscle tissue, where do you think that the cardiac muscle tissue is located?
Heart.
Yeah, so think of like your cardiovascular health, if you go into cardiac arrest or things like that. Cardiac is the heart muscle. Good. Most of the time in science, they use words that help us cue to other things. So it's important to look at the root words when moving forward. So first we have skeletal muscle. When you think of muscle, this is probably the most common that you think of. Its appearance is long, it's cylindrical, meaning that it's kind of like a tube, kind of looks like maybe like a toilet paper tube or a paper towel tube. That's kind of what I think of when I hear the word cylindrical. It's multiple nuclei, striated fibers, okay, so it's kind of got this like striped, bumpy look on the outside. The location is it's attached to bone for movement. Okay, when we looked at that picture of the knee before, there was some muscle tissue in and around your knee. So you've got like your quadriceps, your hamstrings, your calf muscles, things like that are all attached and inserted into different spots around in your knee. And this is not just the only place in your body that attach to bone for movement. So the muscles are what are going to contract and release in order to move something in our body. The nature is voluntary movement. Okay, so as we are speaking right now, I am not telling your lungs to go in and out breathing, okay? I hope that they're still working. I know it's Monday, it's Labor Day, but that would be an involuntary movement. You're not thinking to your lungs, in, out, okay? We have the luxury, the privilege of knowing what that's like. Voluntary movement would be like, oh, I guess I'll go up the stairs instead of taking the elevator this time. Okay, so you're moving, you're telling your body to do that. It's the difference between I'm not telling my body to pick up my phone right now, and now I'm picking up my phone because I have that conscious behavior. Involuntary movement, we'll talk about that in a little bit, is the stuff your body does that you're not consciously thinking of or making it do. So, like your smooth muscle tissue. This appearance is spindle-shaped cells with one nucleus, and it lacks the striation. So it doesn't have that striped, bumpy look on the top like your other muscle tissue does. This is a little bit more flat looking, I would say. It's longer. It has one nucleus. The locations are the walls and hollow organs and vessels, okay? This is like, it's showing a picture there, your digestive system, okay? Aren't you so happy that every time you eat lunch, you don't have to walk your body through how to digest it, right? You're not like, okay, let's go to the stomach. Okay, doing great, let's go to the, no, that's not how it happens, right? This is involuntary movement. Your body does this without you even thinking about it. The word involuntary versus voluntary, okay? You can also think of that like being a volunteer for something. Maybe you volunteer for dance marathon, or maybe you volunteer at the food pantry. That would be something that you choose to do. And involuntary means that you didn't choose to do that. Location of hollow organs and vessels, like it says. So this is also found in your blood vessels. Hey, that's an important one, right? And also the digestive tract, that's good. When you think about pumping oxygen to the rest of your body, you're not telling yourself to do that. Maybe you're in a hard workout and you're like, oh my gosh, breathe, breathe, breathe. But you're breathing even though you're not telling your body to do that. And lastly, we have cardiac muscle tissue. So yes, whoever guessed that right was correct. Cardiac it appears branched cells with a single nucleus. It has striations with darker striations. So you've got some different colors here. They're called intercalated discs between the cells. This is location in the heart. And again, it's an involuntary movement. You're not telling your heart to pump blood to the rest of your body. It's just something that happens. So that's that cardiac muscle tissue. So to review, we have connective tissue, and now we have muscle tissue. And muscle tissue is broken down into skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. So here is skeletal. We talked about it. It's striated, so it looks kind of like a bumpy stripe. I kind of think of it like, I don't know, maybe like a pipe cleaner, like if you were to wrap a pipe cleaner on itself. You remember pipe cleaners from crafts in elementary school? Yeah, that's if you wrap a pipe cleaner around your finger, that kind of has that striated, striped look. This is for movement of your body. This is voluntary. This is the stuff you consciously are telling your body to do. This is smooth muscle tissue. It is that involuntary movement. It's the things like in your intestine or in your blood vessels. That's super important for movement, right? We want our blood vessels to constrict and dilate and things like that, open and close for different reasons. But we don't constantly think of that. That's why it's involuntary. And then we have cardiac, which is the muscle that pumps your heart. It's involuntary, and it has a little bit of both when you're thinking about what it looks like. It has a single nucleus. It has the striations, but it also has darker striations. All right, we're moving on to that nervous tissue. It's that third type of tissue. How are we doing on time? We're doing great. This allows for communication between your cells and your brain and your sensory input. This is the integration of data and motor output. Okay, so whoa, that's a lot of words. What are we trying to do here? This is the reason why when you touch something hot on the stove, you bring your hand away. Okay, it's that sensory input with some motor output. You did not think to yourself, wow, this is hot. I am now going to pull my hand off of the stove. Okay, you had a motor reaction that the sensory input told your brain to do that. Now, not everybody has that same situation. Hold on, take a drink. Okay. So now we have two different types of nervous tissue. We have neurons and neuroglia. Okay, I like nervous tissue. I took neurobiology when I was in my undergrad. This is fun stuff. I like this stuff. It can be really cool. So the nervous tissue are made of neurons. Neurons, when I think of a neuron, I think of something that kind of looks like a tree because it's branch-like, but it also kind of looks like Mike Wazowski from Monsters, Inc. You guys kind of see that? It kind of looks like Mike Wazowski, but like with hair down here. Okay, so this is, it's made up of dendrites, a cell body, and an axon. So the cell body is that part that I kind of circled with the highlighter right there. It's kind of hard to see on the PowerPoint up here. It's a little bit better on my computer. The cell body's in that middle part. It does have a nucleus, which is right here. That nucleus does exactly what you think it does. The dendrites are the little branch-like, makes it look like a tree. I'm kind of drawing a sunshine on the PowerPoint on the Zoom here. Let's draw a sunshine for you guys too. So the dendrites are those branch-like looking things of the tree or the hair on Mike Wazowski. And then, let's see here, it just popped me out of this. There we go. And then the axons are what carries information from the cell body to another nerve cell. So this is one nerve cell at the bottom. The axon is the part that carries it between the different nervous cells. So we've got that axon down there. Okay. So now we have neuroglia. These are a collection of cells that support and nourish those neurons. They outnumber neurons from 9 to 1. So we just talked about what neurons are. Those are the ones that look like Mike Wazowski. Okay, and then we've got neuroglia. They outnumber neurons 9 to 1. And there's some examples, maybe the most common one being that microglia. Okay, this is what supports the neurons. The neurons are what help communicate. The most important one there is probably that microglia. Okay, just a little breakdown of what that top picture looks like. Okay, we've got that cell body here in the middle, if I can draw. Cell body with a nucleus in the middle. Okay, we got that cell body, Zoom class, with that nucleus in the middle. This is considered a neuron. The dendrites are the branch-like that come off the sides, and it does exactly what you think it does. It communicates to other neuron cells, and then the axon is what carries it from one to the other. Here's this microglia, the oligodendrocytes. I can never pronounce things. This is a myelin sheath of the axon. So this is what's supporting those neuron cells. We're talking about this part right here. It's supporting those neuron cells. It nourishes them. It's what helps them communicate between each other. This happens so fast, right? You think about you slam your fingers in the door of your car. Owie, that hurts, right? But what most of the time happens, your fight or flight, you feel that hurt and your body reacts by pulling it away. That's how fast your hand felt the pain, communicated to your brain communicated back to your hand to pull it away. So it does happen very fast. When somebody is paralyzed, they are not able to feel that. So if somebody's paralyzed from the waist down, they would not be able to have that reaction to something that was like on their leg or their knee. Epithelial tissue. So this is that fourth type of tissue. So we've had muscle tissue, nervous tissue, and connective tissue. And now we have epithelial tissue. This is super important for the cavities. It covers your body's surface, and it's also found in glands. These are groups of cells that form tight networks to each other. Excuse me, think of like a networking event. When you go and you meet new people for a job, possibly, or some sort of networking event, same thing happens here. We've got a lot of tight, continuous network of epithelial tissues that help cover your body's surfaces. These cells are anchored by a basement membrane on one side and free on the other side. So it's kind of thinking about like your skin. Like your skin is attached to something internally, right? You have some sort of basement membrane to your skin, but nothing is attached to your skin on this side. Can the Zoom people see my finger example, right? So your finger or your skin is attached to your body, but nothing is attached to it on the other side. It's just open. It is named after the appearance of cell layers and the shape of cells. We're going to talk a little bit. There is transitional epithelium that changes in the appearance in response to tension. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So the next question is, how do we name epithelial tissue? And these guys need to see that slide. It's by the number of cell layers, okay? There will be different slides here that'll show a couple of different pictures that will really help. So the first is simple. This is one layer of cells. Okay, so here at the bottom we have that basement membrane, and I'll highlight that or draw that over here. Here's that basement membrane. Wow, I'm really good at drawing. There's that basement membrane, and here's that one layer of cells. Okay, so you guys can see that a little bit bigger up at the front of the classroom. We have the pseudostratified, which I'll show you a picture on the next slide of what that looks like. It appears to have multiple layers, but only has one layer. And then lastly, we have stratified. This is more than one layer of cells. So this is the three different ones are simple, pseudostratified, and stratified. The word pseudo would be the root word here, pseudo. Okay, that just kind of means like fake or not true. All right, we have a shape of a cell. So here at the bottom, there's that pseudostratified type of the epithelial tissue. Here's that simple. Here's that pseudostratified. Remember, it looks like it has two layers, but it's actually one. Okay, now we also can name epithelial tissue by the shape. So we have cube-shaped, column-shaped, and flattened. Okay, so this would be a pseudostratified columnar, excuse me, which would be that it looks like columns. Think of columns like the Colosseum in Rome. That would be a column-shaped. And let's see here if there's another picture. There is not. Simple, sorry, it's hard to read. Simple, cubital. Okay, there we go, the last one. All right, and then we have the squashimus, which is flattened. It kind of looks like the word squash, right, when you think of something that's squashed. Okay, so what do epithelial tissues look like? I'm going to zoom in for the folks in the back. All right, so we've got that simple. Remember simple, it has one layer of cells. Then you have the different types of shapes. So you have the different, how many rows or how many layers, and then you have the shape, and that's how you name it. So a simple squamous is the lining of the lungs, blood vessels, and it helps protect. That's the top left. It's also showing that basement membrane here at the bottom. That basement membrane helps to attach, remember, to whatever the body is, but then on the outside of that, it's free, okay? So you're thinking of your lungs, okay? If you were to do a dissection of someone's lungs or maybe of a cow or things like that, the lungs, you could take the lungs out, right? It's like this skin where it lines that organ, but the outside of the lung, like it almost, the epithelial tissue is not attached to anything. All right, so this is the blood vessels and the lungs. Then we have this simple cubital. So these are the ones that are a little bit more cube shaped. They're not as squashed looking or flattened as the other ones. This is in the lining of the kidney and tubules and various glands. This absorbs molecules. Then we've got 3 more here at the bottom. We have the simple columnar, which is found in the intestine. We have, and then we have pseudostratified, which is the ones that look like there's 2 layers, but there's actually not. It's just one. And then we have the stratified squamous, which you can definitely tell on the bottom right here that there are 2 layers. It helps that these are different colors, but this is the basement membrane here, and this is definitely more than one row of cells. So that would be that stratified. Good. So now we have the integumentary system. It includes the skin and the accessory organs such as your nails, your hair, and your glands. Okay, you have the epidermis and the dermis that are the 2 regions of the integumentary system. So under the skin, there's a subcutaneous layer between the dermis and the internal structures where fat is stored. Okay, so you get a paper cut on your hand, you can't see fat, right? You just can't. But there is a subcutaneous layer between the dermis and the internal structure where fat is stored. So we're just kind of getting deeper and deeper into the skin. It is important for maintaining homeostasis. Homeostasis is that word I've used before, like when you walk outside and if it's super hot, you start to sweat. The reason you start to sweat is your body's main goal is to pump blood and breathe. And if your internal organs start to overheat, they don't work as well. So the sweating helps to maintain that body temperature. Okay, so this is the same thing. How do we sense on the outside when something is super hot, or when it's hot outside, or even when it's cold outside and you start to shiver and chatter your teeth? Hopefully we don't have to deal with that for at least a couple more months. But when you go outside, you start to chatter your teeth. Your muscles are contracting here. We're trying to produce heat, okay? Maintaining homeostasis. How do we signal that we're feeling cold or we're feeling hot? Our integumentary system is what senses that. It's your skin. When your skin feels cold or hot to the temperatures, you have a muscular outer motor reaction. Okay, so here are some of those functions of the integumentary system. It helps protect the body from physical trauma, invasions of pathogens, and water loss. Aren't you so glad that when you take a drink of water, it doesn't just kind of like fall out of your body? That's pretty cool. Invasions of pathogens. You were probably exposed to lots of pathogens throughout your day that your skin helps protect against, okay? And then physical trauma. Like I give the example of you falling on the sidewalk again, but aren't you glad that your skin is there to protect you from damaging a bone first? It's a little bit better to get a scrape on your knee than it is to break a bone. It helps regulate body temperature. We talked about that. It's like how you sweat or how you shiver when you're cold. When you're shivering, when you're cold, your body is contracting muscles. When you contract your muscles, you get warmed up a little bit. It's the same reason why when you're working out for an extended period of time, you start to feel hot. You start to feel warm. Your muscles are contracting. It's creating heat. It helps us to be aware of our surroundings through sensory receptors, okay? You can also kind of have, like if you're walking down the hallway and you don't hear anybody, but you can kind of sense that someone is there and you turn around and somebody's been walking 10 yards behind you. You've all felt like that, right? But those are some sensory receptors. You can feel heat or cold. You can feel when there's pain, things like that. Those are different sensory receptors. And then it also synthesizes chemicals such as melanin and vitamin D. Okay, when you think of vitamin D, it's important. It's what you get when the sun gives us vitamin D, and our skin helps synthesize that chemical for our body to use it. Being out in the sun is important for a lot of things, but a main thing is that it helps affect your mood. So if you've ever been having a bad day, go outside, get some vitamin D. It'll help raise your serotonin levels a little bit and help you have a little bit better day. It's always good to get some fresh air. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is from the sun. Okay, there are two regions of the skin, the epidermis and the dermis. You've maybe heard of these words before. That dang cricket. Sorry. The epidermis and the dermis are the two regions of the skin. You can kind of see them over here. I'm going to zoom in for the PowerPoint here. We've got that epidermis, which is the top part, and the dermis, which is under that, and then that subcutaneous layer, which is between your skin and where fat is stored. Okay, so this is just getting deeper and deeper into your skin. This is like the hair, like hair on your arm or your head or things like that. And then you get a little bit lower. So where it says hair shaft, those are the hairs. The epidermis is what we're talking about here. And then the dermis, that subcutaneous layer, is what is between your skin and where the fat is stored. The way I remember the difference between epidermis and dermis, when you say the word epidermis, it sounds like up of dermis. It's on top of the dermis. So that's the way I remember that. Okay, so we have the epidermis. This is that thin outermost layer of skin. It's made of epithelial tissue, which is why we're talking about it, because we're talking about tissues today. It is the upmost layers of your skin that are actually dead and become filled with keratin, thus acting as a waterproof barrier. Okay, so yes, the skin that you are looking at right now is dead. Okay, that's why it has a different color than if you were to get a paper cut on your hand and you could see the inside of your skin is a little bit more pinkish red. So the utmost layers are dead and they become filled with keratin, which is a protein that acts as a waterproof barrier. Langerhans cells are a type of white blood cells that help fight off pathogens, and the melanocytes are that produce melanin that lead to skin color and protection from UV light. This is why when you go outside, you don't instantly get skin cancer, but over time, skin cancer is possible when these types of cells are damaged because we're not protecting against that UV light. Some cells are then converted to cholesterol to vitamin D. The dermis is what is next, if I can get that clicked. It's that thick inner layer of that skin. There's a really good picture on the next slide. It is made of dense fibrous connective tissue. Okay, remember we talked about fibrous connective tissue? There can either be loose or dense. This is dense. It contains elastic and collagen fibers, and it contains blood vessels and many sensory receptors and glands. You'll be able to see it a little bit better on this picture on the next slide. So this is a little bit of a zoomed in picture of your skin. So here you have that hair follicle. This is where hair could grow out of if it wanted to. You then have the keratinized dead skin cells, which are what you guys see every single day. This is the epidermis. Then underneath, you have that dense connective tissue of the dermis. These in between are the cells that are going through that keratinization. They're dead cells that have not been keratinized yet. So there's the difference a little bit between the epidermis and the dermis. At the bottom, it says 140. That just means the total magnification. So this is looking at it under some sort of microscope. Does anybody have a guess of what type of microscope you would be looking at this with? Some of the clues. So we're zoomed in. It's a picture, and I would even argue that it's a 3D picture because you can see the different shading. So maybe you guys can go back and look at which microscope that would be. It also says it at the bottom, light microscope. Okay. What do you need to know about skin cancer? Okay, so skin cancer is very common. It's common in a sense that you hear about it a lot. Most of the time, it does not lead to death, but it can. It just depends on the type. So we have 2 of the 3 types that arise in the epidermis. So remember where the epidermis is? It's on top of the dermis. The basal cell sarcoma is the most common yet least deadly form of skin cancer. It's, like I said, it's least deadly. It happens. Essentially what happens is that it just gets removed and it doesn't give you any problems. Okay, that's not really good at underlining with this little red marker that probably bothers you. The melanoma is the most deadly form of skin cancer, but it's the least common. Okay, so skin cancer is not common to be deadly, if that makes any sense at all. If you have a melanoma, that is the most deadly form of skin cancer. That means it could spread to other things. So how do we prevent skin cancer? What do we need to know? It says to stay out of the sun between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. But you're like, wait a second, you just told me to go outside. Yes, but when you do go outside, it's important to wear protective clothing or sunscreen so that you're still getting vitamin D, but you're not damaging your skin cells on the outside. Wear treated sunglasses or a wide-brimmed hat. Use sunscreen with an SPF at least 15 that protects from UVA and UVB rays. These are just different types of light or rays. And do not use tanning beds because that's very concentrated UV light. That's more concentrated than the natural sun. What skin cancer might look like. So they always tell you when you go whether to get something checked out at your dermatologist or at your doctor is you're looking for discoloration and a different shape. So if you're worried about a spot on your skin that could be skin cancer, you look for, has it changed colors recently or within the last couple of months? And has it changed shape or does it have a different shape? So this is a basal cell sarcoma. Right here, as you can tell, it has a little bit of discoloration. Wow, that was a really bad drawing of the circle. It has discoloration, so you can see some red, you can see some greenish brown, you can see some yellow, and it has a weird shape. Then you have that melanoma. This maybe started out a different color, and then it became this darker reddish brown color. When in doubt, get it checked out. What are some accessory glands of the skin and why are they important? So you probably are very aware of your nails, your hair follicles, your oil glands, and your sweat glands. These are important for different reasons. So your nails are derived from the epidermis, which is that first layer of skin, and they offer protective covering. You use your hands for a lot of different things. So the nails on your hands are not just so you can have them painted pretty colors, but because it protects your hands and your fingers from external trauma, I guess you could say. The hair follicles are derived from the dermis, which is that second layer of skin, but your hair grows from the epidermis. So it's rooted in your dermis and it grows out of your skin. You probably maybe have some hair on your arms or your head. Hair follicles are important for also regulating body temperature. Oil glands are associated with hair and produce sebum that lubricates the hair and skin. And I don't like that word, and it gets rid of bacterial growth, okay? So they say that you're not supposed to like wash your hair every day, right? There's some natural oils in your hair that actually help to condition and get rid of bacteria. But there's some exceptions to that. If you're an athlete or somebody who likes to be active daily, it's important to get the dirt and the sweat and the salt out of your hair. So the oil glands are important for getting bacteria away from your body. So there's kind of like a balance, right? You don't want to go like more than a week or two without maybe at least rinsing your hair or showering. But you also don't want to shower every hour of the day because you'll lose those oil glands that are really important for getting the bacteria away and also conditioning your hair. So there's a balance here, and it's also very situational for every type of lifestyle. Then you have sweat glands. These are derived from the dermis. They help regulate body temperature, and that seems pretty understandable, right? If you sweat because you're sweating to cool your body temperature down a little bit because it's probably hot outside, or maybe you were working out and you're sweating. Okay, so let's talk about like in relation to where are we at? Like, why are we talking about this? So we talked about tissues. When you have a group of tissues, they make up an organ, like your heart, your lungs. Your skin is an organ. Those organs make up organ systems. So an organ is 2 or more tissue types working together towards a particular function. An organ system is a combination of organs. So like your lungs and your heart, or your skin and your nervous system tissues. They work together to carry out a particular function. So you have tissues to organs, organs to organ systems. All right, here's a couple examples of some organ systems in the body. First, we have that integumentary system. This is what helps protect, let's see if I can zoom in, helps protect the body, provides temperature, homeostasis, synthesizes vitamin D, and receives sensory inputs. We just talked about that a little bit. So these are the different types of organ systems. You have that cardiovascular system, the lymphatic and immune system. You've maybe heard of your immune system, right? What do you do when it comes to be time for flu season, or I guess it's been coronavirus season for a while, but what are some things you can do to help your immune system? Does anybody have any ideas?
Take supplements.
Say that again.
Maybe like take supplements.
Supplements, yeah. The one supplement I think of is vitamin C. Okay, vitamin C helps for a lot of different reasons. You can get that from eating some fruit or vegetables have vitamin C. You can take it as a supplement. That helps your immune system. Some other things are being active. Most of the time, not every time, but the reason that people get more sick in the winter is because you become a little bit more stationary. Think about what happens in the winter. It's cold outside, especially in Iowa, and you don't go outside and walk your dog as much, or you maybe aren't going for a bike ride, or you're not walking down to the grocery store, or you're going to maybe drive, or there was a snow day so you can't really do much and you're sitting on your couch watching some Netflix. Most of the time people get more sick in the winter because they're not moving their bodies as much and they're trapped in their own little bubble of air. So it's really important for your immune system to get outside, to have some fresh air, to move a little bit. Maybe that just means taking a walk down the block and back. Those are some good things for your immune system. And some studies, with coronavirus comes out that says that having a good immune system and able to fight off these infections can help you. It's the reason why most young people who, not every situation, who get coronavirus are able to fight it off and have maybe low to minimum symptoms. Maybe you have a fever, body chills, things like that. It's when you start to have those underlying conditions that bring more complications to it. So getting outside and doing socially distant activities, like I said, going for a walk with your dog or going for a bike ride, are super good things for your immune system as well. The other types of systems down there are the digestive system, the respiratory system, and the urinary system. I don't need to read each bullet point there. This is in your book, figure 413. A good test quiz question would be maybe like, what are some organs in relation to an organ system? Or what does this organ system do? You don't need to memorize all the organ systems, but I would maybe kind of have an understanding of what each word means. Because when I look at digestive system, to me, that means like, okay, my esophagus, my stomach, my intestines, right? I kind of can have an understanding of what do I use to digest my food? Why is that important? Why do we eat food? Well, you think of it for energy, but you also think of it for nutrients. It's why we chew things up and break it down into smaller pieces, and then the enzymes and the acid in our stomach break it down even more. We want to break it down to those core nutrients so that it's easy for our body to take in those nutrients, like vitamin C. Maybe you ate an apple or an orange and you're breaking it down to get it into your immune system and your digestive system. So like I said, maybe a good test question would be, name a organ system and maybe some of the organs that are involved in that system. You wouldn't have to memorize all of them, but you maybe need to know one or two really well. Oops, I hit end show. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. So now we are on, there's a couple more. You have skeletal system, muscle system, nervous system, endocrine system, reproductive system. Again, I'm not going to read all those bullet points. Good to refresh those. Figure 4.1.3. What are body cavities? Okay, we're getting close here. Less than 10 slides, so stay with me here. We've got body cavities. So this is the space in your body that holds those important organs or systems and things like that. So you have that top one, that cranial cavity. This is what contains the brain, okay? Maybe sometimes it's hard to think of a cavity, but I think that these pictures do a really good job. They took the organs out. They still have some structural things here to give you a reference point, but a cavity is just that space that holds something. So your thoracic cavity is what contains your heart, your lungs, and your esophagus. So kind of in that chest area, the thoracic cavity. Then you have your abdominal cavity, your pelvic cavity, and things like that. So this is just that space that holds those organs that is important. Next one. There we go. What about the body membranes and that line those cavities? So now we're thinking about these cavities and what makes them, or how are they lined, or how are they created? So you have the mucous membranes. This lines the digestive, the respiratory, urinary, and reproductive systems. Okay, so this is just some sort of mucous membrane. I think of it like when you're thinking of digesting food, okay, you have saliva and mucus in your throat and in your mouth, that kind of like slimy like substance that's going to help you digest your food a little bit better. It's going to help move the food down to your stomach. Then we have the serous membranes. This lines the lungs, the heart, the abdominal cavity, and the internal organs, and it's named after their location. So there's a picture over here. These are some of those different types of serous membranes. We've got, I'm going to try and draw on here. Good. So those are the ones, the pleura is the lungs, the peritoneum is the abdominal cavity and the organs, and then the pericardium is the heart. And the way I remember pericardium is that root word cardi, like cardio or cardiovascular. That one helps. The peritoneum, wow, I said it right the first time. Perineum is the abdominal cavity and the organs, and the pleura is the lungs. Okay, so we have synovial membranes and the meninges. These are also other types of body membranes that line those cavities. They line the cavities of freely movable joints. Those are synovial membranes. So your joints are the difference between there's a difference between joints and ligaments. It's how your muscles attach to your bones for movement. Those are considered joints. So thinking about all the joints of your body, there's synovial membranes there that help line the cavities of those freely movable joints. Then you have the meninges. This covers the brain and the spinal cord, okay? So it's pretty self-explanatory there. It's super important for protection, but also for movement and fluidity. So what is homeostasis? We've kind of mentioned this word a couple times. The way I remember the word homeostasis is when I think of, for me personally, when I go home, I just feel myself, right? So when you're homeostasis, it's when your body's in the most stable condition. Its ability, like it says, the ability to maintain a relatively constant internal environment in the body. Our main goal for our body is to be as efficient as possible to pump blood and intake oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. Those are our only, like what our body is constantly thinking of, right? To maintain that at the most efficient temperature and location as possible, our body has mechanisms in order to maintain that, okay? The nervous system and the endocrine systems are key in maintaining homeostasis. So we talked about why when you put your hand on that hot stove and you pull it away, so that is your endocrine system, which is your skin, touching the hot plate or the stove. Your nervous system is communicating from your hand to your brain and from your brain to your hand, and your muscles, your muscle tissue or your motor response is to pull your hand away, and this is to help maintain homeostasis. Our body does not want our hand to burn off. That would be a bad deal, right? It's helping protect you. This, the last bullet point says changes from the normal tolerance limits result in illness or even death, okay? So when you hear of somebody getting hypothermia, it's when they've been too cold for too long, okay? This is what it results in illness or even death when we're not at homeostasis. Because if you go outside and you walk to your class and you decided to not wear your coat that day and it's December 17th and it's cold, you're going to be okay, right? As long as you walk to your building and into your class, okay? But now it's February 6th and there's a blizzard happening and you decided to stand outside for an hour. Okay, your body's going to eventually, homeostasis doesn't last forever, right? You can't just shiver your way to safety. That's probably not going to happen. So changes from the normal tolerance limit. So normally able to tolerate that, okay? I've seen people wear shorts in the winter. They don't get hypothermia. You maybe joke about it, but if that same person were to go to Antarctica and spend 4 hours out in there with shorts on, they're probably going to have some sort of illness. Okay. All systems are important to maintaining homeostasis. So you think simply of sweating helping to cool off your skin, but there's so much more and different steps to that. I really don't want to read each of these points to you, but figure 4.15 helps describe how all the systems work together. So the example of sweating, your skin may feel hot, but our body's main goal is to maintain the temperatures of our internal organs, mainly our lungs and our heart. So when you are starting to feel warm, your body will sweat and cool off your skin, but then it works together to help cool off your internal organs as well. Or the flip side, when you're trying to warm up when it's cold out. Okay, so all of these systems work together to contribute to maintain homeostasis, feeling at, the best constant internal state as possible. So lastly, a couple more slides here. We have negative and positive feedback. So negative feedback and positive feedback are the ways that we maintain homeostasis. How does our body react? Okay, I also think about this if you've ever done anything, maybe music, or you were in the arts, or maybe you were on a sports team, and when you hear somebody give you negative feedback, that would be like, come on, Alex, you suck. You're not great at this. Negative feedback. That was supposed to motivate you, right? But then you have positive feedback where it's like, it's okay, Alex, you can get it this next time. All right, so hold on a second. We're going to make that make sense in a little bit. But when I think of negative and positive feedback, I think of some sort of criticism and the way that you react to that. So the negative feedback is the output of the system resolves or corrects the original stimulus. And then the positive feedback, it brings about an increasing change in the same direction as the original stimulus. So there's a really good picture on the next slide, the next two slides. So negative feedback. So here we have something that's off in our homeostasis. So maybe you had too much body heat or too little. We have some sort of stimulus that is telling our body, like, hey, this is off right now. Like, we need to kind of come back into normal. What are we going to do? It sends data to the control center, which would be our brain. The control center then directs the response to the stimulus, and there's negative feedback, and you return back to normal. Okay, nothing was added. It's essentially the sensor corrected the stimulus. A negative feedback would be pulling your hand away from the hot plate. It just corrected the stimulus. We just pulled it away. We're not going to have to do anything about that. Okay, it just corrected the stimulus. So this one is an example of negative feedback being body temperature. I can zoom in for the folks here. There we go. Okay, so in the middle it says you have like little teeter-totters. Does anybody remember teeter-totters from the playground? So if you have above normal body temperature, it senses that. Your skin tells your brain, hey, we're a little hot over here. What happens is then your control center, it knows that our regular body temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. It's in the direct response to the stimulus. The blood vessels dilate, meaning they get a little bit bigger. The sweat glands secrete some sweat, and we send some solution straight to the spot of where we were feeling too hot, to our skin. Same thing down here with lower than normal body temperature. You constrict your blood vessels, you start to shiver, or maybe you get goosebumps, and the sweat glands are inactive on the bottom because you don't want to start sweating while you're cold. That's the worst, right? Or if you've ever heard of somebody saying, oh, my sweat dried, now I'm cold. Same thing, okay? So that's negative feedback. We're sending the feedback directly to where we're having the issue. Oops. Then we have positive feedback. This is a mechanism for increasing the change of the internal environment in one direction. Okay, so the last one kind of had like a circular thing. We had an issue, we told that we had an issue, we solved the issue, we're back to normal. And then maybe you have to go the other way. It's kind of like a circular motion. This is increasing the change of the internal environment in one direction. I think of it like a line with an arrow. I'm going to draw that because that seems like a good, so I think of it like a line with an arrow. This is positive feedback. Let's see if I can draw it on this here for you guys. Oh. There we go. That's what I think of when I think of positive feedback. An example of this would be secretion of oxytocin during birth to continually increase the uterine contractions. Okay? So this is like, we're just going full send. We're going to send all of these oxytocin to that area for the birth so that we can birth this child. It's not like, oh, is that enough? Nope. Okay. How about this? It's just like all the way full send of that. It can be harmful, such as when we have a fever that's too high and continues to rise. So if you have some sort of illness in your body or a pathogen or an infection, or sometimes even coronavirus, you start to get a fever. All right, it's when your fever starts to take off and not come back, that's too much positive feedback, that you go get it checked out and you have to figure out some sort of negative feedback to give it. Okay, so we've got two types of feedback. Negative feedback, I think of the circle, right? We send it straight to our solution and we figured it out. Positive feedback, we just send all we got so that we can fix the problem. Okay? And usually a fever is raising that body temperature to help kill and move your blood a little bit faster to get those white blood cells there to kill the pathogen and the infection. Look at that, 240. And we have completed chapter 4 PowerPoint. So it goes without saying that we have an exam on September 18th. Okay, we're going to have a review session on Monday, what is that, the 5th, the 14th? 14th, right, Monday's the 14th? There we go, I should know that. Monday the 14th will be a review session of chapters 1 through 4. So congratulations, we get Friday off. Yay. Catch up on your homework, your sleep. How about that, Zoom? Can I at least get a thumbs up for having Friday off? No class on Friday. And then Wednesday, same setup. first half of the alphabet comes into lab if you're in person. We're going to be working with antibiotics, which is really cool. You're in here for 45 minutes. There's a 10-minute transition for us to clean and wipe things down. And then the second half comes in person of the alphabet. So everybody in the classroom right now is in my first session. If something happens or if you are quarantined or isolated, you just log on to Zoom during your regularly scheduled 45-minute time and you watch. We kind of did a trial and error of that this last week and it was pretty good. We had Zoom on my phone and we were able to kind of walk around and I thought that was pretty cool. And then we'll do another quiz. I'm going to try and change the settings so that you can do it on my Wartburg for that quiz on Wednesday. But when in doubt, I will send you a Word document and you can always just turn it in that way if as a backup. But let's see if I can get it to work on my Wartburg this week. Is there any questions in the classroom or on Zoom about anything?
When is chapter 3 assignment due? Today?
The chapter 3 lecture assignment, it was supposed to be due today, but I didn't press open in time and that was my fault. So you have until tomorrow at 11:55 to complete that. So you have over 24 hours to complete it. And I did take a screenshot. Let's see if I can go back to my whiteboard. See if that's still up here. There you go. Can you guys see that? That might help you a little bit, Barbara. And that's just the same thing that I wrote up here for you guys.
It's not. Oh, yeah.
Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
All right, I think we need to add one down here. Let's put it in orange.
So the exam, what, taking it like online?
Yes, the exam will be September 18th. There will be no in-person that day. The exam will be on my Wartburg.
Okay.
If you or anybody has any accommodations, make sure that you let me know ahead of time. And I can change your settings on that online. So if you're somebody who needs more time, just let me know or send me your official document or whatever that entails. If, say, I normally would have 2 hours as a limit, maybe we double that and give you 4 hours. Because it's an online exam, it's kind of on you to find your own testing location. If you are somebody who has an accommodation that you need a quiet testing space. But if you're having trouble with that, I may be able to find a place for you in the Science Center to take that. Well, first of all, nobody will be in this classroom, so you could also come, we could talk about that, and you could come sit in here if you needed a quiet testing space. All right, any other questions?
Will we have to download a special web browser to take it?
I haven't decided yet. I don't think so. When I plan on doing it through my Wartburg.
And did you manage to send us the PowerPoint from Friday?
The PowerPoint from Friday should be on my Wartburg under the syllabus section. So when you go to my Wartburg and you go to this Bio 130 course, it would be under syllabus, and there's chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 PowerPoint. And I think there's even an exam 1 study tool on there for you.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, take care. I'll see everyone Wednesday, and then we have no class on Friday, no Zoom, no in-person on Friday. You can have a little afternoon nap. Seems like.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for wiping your tables down.